All right, everyone, get ready, because today we're diving deep into something that might sound, well, a little drier than usual. Education.
Oh, but this is far from your typical back-to-school lecture, trust me.
Yeah, this essay we're looking at today, it's like straight up arguing that literature and history, those are the real MVPs when it comes to, building minds and all that.
It's definitely a unique take on education reform, not gonna lie.
Okay, so picture this, right? You, dear listener, maybe you're about to give a big presentation on how to shake up education. Or maybe you're just someone who loves learning new things, digging below the surface. Well, that's us today. We're going to break down this essay, figure out why this whole knowledge-based education thing, it matters so much, especially now.
Yeah, it really digs into how our brains are wired to learn. And spoiler alert, stories are way more important than you might think.
Okay, so from the get-go, this essay is all about how crucial it is to teach through literature, especially early on. Like it's saying our brains are practically hardwired for it. Stories, language, that's how we connect.
It's wild, right? Like we're predisposed to soak up knowledge when it's wrapped up in a good narrative. Even when we get to, physics or advanced writing, we're still tapping into that same part of us that wants a good story.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I bet I could tell you the plot of Romeo and Juliet way easier than I could remember some physics formula.
Right. And you know what's interesting? The essay uses that exact idea to explain how we learn as kids.
Oh, how so?
Think about it. Fairy tales, myths, bedtime stories. It's all narratives. It's like we lay down these tracks for complex thinking later on. We learn through story before we even open a textbook.
Huh. So it's like we kind of lose sight of that as we get older. We get so focused on shoving facts into our brains that we forget about the why behind it all.
Exactly. The essay calls it applied philosophy, like that bigger picture, the framework that gives meaning to all those facts. Without it, we're just collecting tools, but we don't know what to build.
It's like having a toolbox, but no instructions. Yeah.
Exactly. You got a hammer, you got a screwdriver, but no blueprint. Chaos. And the essay argues that without that guiding philosophy, we end up with this patchwork of beliefs instead of a cohesive understanding.
That really makes you think, huh? Like, how intentional are we, really, about what we choose to learn and how we connect the dots in our own lives?
Right. Like, are we just absorbing whatever's thrown at us, or are we actively building our own framework for understanding the world? Big questions.
And here's where it gets even more interesting. It's not just about, the mechanics of learning. This essay also talks about this, almost spiritual feeling you get when you really connect with knowledge deeply.
Oh, yeah. It's intense. The essay uses this phrase, oriental fragrancy, to try and capture how transformative real learning can be. Not just knowing facts, but being changed by them.
Wow, okay, yeah, that's a world away from memorizing multiplication tables, that's for sure.
Right. This is about a deep, profound understanding that shifts how you see everything. Like the difference between just knowing a song exists and really listening to it, letting it move you, and the essay saying we've gotten away from that kind of deep engagement with knowledge.
And that actually leads into something I found kind of concerning. The essay, it gets pretty critical of this push for purely practical education. Like we're stripping away the magic of learning and just, becoming robots.
It's interesting you say that. See, this essay was written a while back, early 1900s. And there was this huge push towards vocational training back then, prioritizing job skills above all else. So this essay is very much a reaction to that.
So this whole debate about what we should be teaching and why, it's not exactly new then, is it?
Nope, not at all.
Yeah.
And this essay is like a voice from the past, basically shouting, hey, don't forget about the power of deep, meaningful learning. We get so caught up in the latest educational technology, teaching trends, all that. But some things are timeless, right?
Totally. It's like we need to give young people the map and the compass to navigate the world, not just a bus ticket to get them through it.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And that brings us to this really powerful idea the essay keeps coming to. The city of mind. Like a truly enriching education. It's not just about job skills. It's about opening up this whole world of possibilities.
So instead of just churning out workers, are we actually giving young people the keys to that city, equipping them to actually think critically, engage with complex issues, make the world a better place?
Those are exactly the questions this essay wants us to grapple with. And to get there, we need to understand this dilemma it lays out.
Oh, yeah. And that's where John Bull's dilemma comes in, right?
Yeah.
Now, who is this John Bull character?
So the essay explains that John Bull is kind of like a stand-in for everyday people. think of it like your Uncle Sam, but for England. This isn't just about one student in a classroom. It's about society as a whole facing this critical choice.
So instead of one student, it's really about what a whole country values when it comes to education, right? So what is John Bull's dilemma then?
Well, the essay says England is at a crossroads. Stick with the old ways of teaching, which aren't really working, or embrace this knowledge-based approach and, unleash its potential. It's pretty vivid, this image of England becoming a greater nation, more worthy of its place in the world.
Okay, so swap out England for, say, the US or even the whole world. Does that dilemma still feel relevant today? I mean, we're still wrestling with those questions of what knowledge matters most, right? How to even teach it in a way that sticks? What kind of people are we trying to help create?
Oh, absolutely. It's like this essay is a message from a century ago going, hey, don't underestimate the power of deep, meaningful learning. It's easy to get caught up in the latest educational technology, new teaching fads, but some things just stay important,
Totally. That makes me think about the city of mind idea again. It's like we can't just give people a bus ticket to get through that city. They need the map, the compass, the whole deal to really explore it.
Exactly. And the essay, it argues that if we neglect those things of the spirit, as it calls them, if we just chase material success, that's when we risk losing something really vital.
It makes you want to dust off those classic books, right? Read them with fresh eyes, knowing they might have, the secrets to civilization hidden in there. But I gotta ask, this essay is super into literature specifically. What about other kinds of knowledge? Did it mention geography at one point?
Good catch. Yeah, literature is definitely the star of the show, but it does acknowledge other disciplines. There's a part where it talks about science and nature helping us understand stuff, but only after we've grasped that fundamental principle knowledge, as it calls it.
So is there a hierarchy of knowledge then? Literature is the foundation and everything else is built on top of that.
That's what it sounds like, yeah. It's saying literature gives us that framework, that moral compass to navigate all those other areas of knowledge. Remember, the cray is profitable also, for example, of life and instruction and manners. It's about shaping character as much as intellect.
Funny how often that gets overlooked these days. We like to separate everything into boxes, but this essay is all about how interconnected it all really is. But you mentioned geography before.
Yes, and it's actually a great example. The essay criticizes what it calls the scientific method of teaching geography, saying it creates this priggish relationship with the earth.
Priggish?
Yeah, overly formal, stuffy, all about facts and figures instead of, wonder. Instead, it says we need vivid descriptions, stories that spark a kid's imagination.
So ditch the memorizing state capitals and get them reading travelogues, adventure stories, really get a feel for a place.
Exactly. The essay truly believes that the kind of learning that lasts, that changes you, happens when we connect with information on an emotional, imaginative level.
Which, wow, when you think about how much information overload there is these days, are we even giving young people the tools to handle it all, to make sense of the world? Or are we just, dumping more puzzle pieces on them without the box to show what the picture's supposed to be?
$1 million question, right? And this essay seems to argue that literature, history, philosophy, those fields that make us ask the big questions about being human, those are crucial for developing critical thinking skills, the skills we need to navigate this crazy world.
So it's not just what we learn, it's how we learn it. And maybe even more importantly, why we learn it in the first place.
Exactly. Which brings us to the essay's conclusion, which is both a call to action and this really deep reflection on the true purpose of education.
Oh yeah, that line about think clear, feel deep, bear fruit well. It's like a mantra for anyone on that journey of knowledge, whatever form it takes. It's what's the point of learning all this stuff, right? If it doesn't actually lead to something, if it doesn't help us grow, become better people, make the world a little brighter.
It's not just about stuffing our heads with facts, right? This essay is arguing that real education, it's about using what we learn to live better, more meaningful lives, to make a difference, contribute to something bigger than ourselves. That's the fruit it's talking about.
Yeah, that really hits home for me. We all have that potential to leave things a little better than how we found them.
Exactly. And that goes back to nurturing the whole person. It's not enough to just hand someone a bunch of skills and say, good luck. We need to cultivate their empathy, their sense of right and wrong, give them the tools to face tough situations, make ethical choices. This essay makes it clear. Literature, history, philosophy, all that stuff. It's not just fluff. It's foundational.
It's about connecting the head and the heart, isn't it? Makes me think, this essay, it's about more than just changing schools. It's about living a more examined life, more intentional.
Absolutely. And that means lifelong learning, right?
Yeah.
Always coming back to those big questions that humans have been wrestling with forever.
So less about getting all the answers, more about being okay with the journey. Yeah. And figuring out how we can use what we learn along the way to actually do something good.
Beautifully put. It's a challenge, no doubt.
Yeah.
But man, it's worth it.
Couldn't agree more. And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive for today. But for you, dear listener, the conversation doesn't have to end here. If this essay got you thinking, if you're feeling that pull to think clear, feel deep, bear fruit well, what does that look like in your own life? What kind of fruit do you want to cultivate? What mark do you want to leave on the world?
Those are questions worth pondering indeed.